Everyone talks about having a deer sanctuary on their land, and it might even be land that they hunt on public land. Public land can have deer sanctuaries too. In fact, that's what I like to hunt on public land, is to find that area that I would refer to as a sanctuary that's away from people, that I think people aren't going to infringe on, and then I go hunt. And if there's someone there, if there's another hunter, I go to plan B. But difference is that private land, you can actually build this, and you can build it in a lot smaller, more compact area. You know, a mature buck only moves 200-300 yards for the majority of the season during the daylight. Now at night he might move 3 square miles, but the bottom line is his home range during the daylight is very small. And on public land, it's a lot larger. He has more space. He takes it. He gets bumped around. Food sources change. He moves around. But let's talk about a sanctuary. I think we need to look at, traditionally, what is a sanctuary? You know, it's an area where we set aside on some land and we don't put any hunting pressure on it. And I think traditionally people think sanctuary, in order to understand what deer need the most, if you understand that, what an actual sanctuary is makes a whole lot more sense. It helps you hunt, helps you recognize where mature bucks are going to be. Traditionally, in sanctuaries, I think people look at it all wrong. And what I mean by that is people look at it that a sanctuary is a bedding area. Most sacred place in the woods, a mature buck bedding area. But that's only such a small part of what an actual sanctuary is. And so traditionally, I think people have really been misled in a lot of ways with deer hunting, traditional deer hunting, because people don't analyze hunting. And analyzing hunting, you know, across the country, across the board, big picture. They kind of look at their own area. You know, they're in an ag area. It's wooded, it's 60 to 100 acres, it's surrounded by ag. Deer do this here, so they do it everywhere. Or you live in a big wood setting. Deer do this there, they like to eat this there, so they like to eat that everywhere. It's like people can't look past that big picture and say, you know, maybe deer do something a little bit different somewhere else. And it's not the concepts of deer movement and layering bedding, it's not those concepts we teach. Those are all the same everywhere. The balance has changed, distance has changed. That's why we have digital land management at whitetailstrategy.com. You can look at that and see all those pieces, and we'll be able to help you move those around and manipulate those on your land. But bottom line is, those don't change, but everything else. What a deer feeds on, what he likes to bed in, how thick that bedding area has to be. Of course, the habitat changes, but there's a lot of diversity and change across the whitetail landscape when it comes to type of habitat and what a deer actually needs in a given area. But when it comes to bedding, is that actually just a sanctuary? And that's where I think traditionally, again, people have been misled because it's only such a small piece. It keeps people from seeing the big picture. What does a doe need? A doe needs year-round good cover, thick cover. They need good fawning cover. But that good fawning cover is thick cover. It's high stem count cover, meaning weeds, brush, bushes, briars, hard to regen, lots of stems that helps break apart scent molecules, keeps a predator from finding a fawn. We actually had a picture recently. We actually did take out some coyotes last winter, and I don't even know if you saw that, but we have a video of a coyote running away with a fawn in its mouth. And then the doe, and we know it's right in front of where I shot bow. And this doe has gone back and forth. It went back and forth in front of that camera for about a day and a half, looking into the cover where that fawn used to be. And I find it hard to believe that that coyote even found that doe. It's a strip of gray dogwood, sumac, briars, switchgrass on the outside. It is a thinner strip. But boy, that thing had to almost stumble on top of it, or the fawn had to get up and run in front of it. I don't know. But pretty crazy to see. And knowing that there's we have a lot of fawns in the property. I'm seeing a couple sets of twins. You know, there can't be that big a predation on fawns on the property, or we wouldn't have, you know, a fawn plus per every doe when it gets into the fall. If they're easy pickings, they'd get more of them. So it's sad to see. But knowing we have all this thick cover and we don't see a lot of fawn loss, that sets my mind at ease a little bit. But that's what a doe needs. They need that thick cover. And that thick cover persists. They need that for the entire year. They also need adequate food. What I mean by that is, what I see with does and fawns, Yeah, if there's a big standing cornfield a half mile away, a big corn pile behind someone's corn crib or something, they'll travel a long ways to go get that. But by and large, they put up with a reduction in food in their home range if it means they can stay home. Their home bodies, they have a smaller range. Big difference with bucks. Bucks need open, overstory, less thick of cover in the summer than they do in the fall. Thinking about their velvet, there is a pain associated with that. If they run through thick brush, that's not where they want to live during the summertime, but it's exactly where they want to live in fall and winter. Now, sometimes in some areas, bucks just have to live where they live. You know, there's nothing else. If there's going to be a buck, they have to live in open cover all year round or something. They probably don't get to that age, or a very old age. Maybe there's not a lot of hunters, so they get to an older age, but just because they have open cover doesn't mean that that's what they require. They want open cover in the summer for shade, airflow. They're not smashing their velvet, and they want thick cover during the fall and winter. Mature bucks seem to have an uncanny ability to find the best food. Repeat that. They find the best food. And because their home range is several times greater than does and fawns, they're not only willing, able, but they're going to go find that better food somewhere, even if it's within a couple miles or more. Near a big wilderness setting, you talk about those balances of movement. Big wilderness setting, hardwoods, and it's not fragmented by ag fields and food plots and private land. They'll travel even further to find really good food. Now, in the case of public land, the food source of the moment's always changing. Might have been apples along a road somewhere earlier. It might have been white oaks, then red oaks. It might be beech nuts. It might be a clear cut more later in the fall. So they'll move to find that, where does and fawns might have just been around that clear cut the whole time, or in that apple tree area. If it's thick and there's a little bit of browse, maybe they stay there their whole 365. A lot different with bucks. They'll go find that. So let's look at down here. This isn't like a Christmas crown. I know the red and green may be a bad choice of colors. But I want you to look at big food plot on the bottom, doe bedding, fawn, and then finally out here you have potential mature buck bedding. And people look at like, well, we give this 10 acres to deer and we don't ever go in there. Folks, a sanctuary, how do you build a sanctuary? How do you attract bucks and does to that sanctuary? You have to have unpressured food. You have to. So while people put so much emphasis traditionally on bedding areas and buck bedding areas being that sanctuary and that ultimate sanctuary on your land, it really boils down to the food source. Why? Because if that food source is pressured, deer want to hit that food source, that major food source. Doesn't matter if it's a clear cut in the woods and a stand of apples, white oaks, food plots on your land. They're sitting back eating twigs, shrub tips, hardwood regeneration, acorns, hard to digest food in their bedding areas. They feed twice during their bedding area hours. That third feeding of the day out of 5, they want to go hit their best feeding of the day, which is the last moments of light, last hour of daylight. I find mature bucks will be in and around that last bit of daylight, maybe an hour after, a half hour, or right before it gets dark. But bottom line is that's their biggest feeding of the day. They don't want to go to that feeding if they have to travel through hunting pressure, big open woods, open fields. So you can have all those bedding areas you want, but if you don't have an unpressured food source for those deer hitting those, and you spook out that food source that those bedding areas rely on, think about it this way. Don't think about deer relying on that food or bucks relying on that food. Think of your bedding areas relying on that food, meaning if they're not hitting that food, then those bedding areas aren't going to be full. If you don't have food as a basis for that foundation of daily movement, then you're not going to have deer in the bedding areas. That's why a bedding area on public land can be vacant for several weeks, and all of a sudden there's a mature buck in this bedding area, and you find a bunch of rubs and scrapes in the off season, but it's because that food source changed, so now it puts him in that bedding area. Hope that makes sense. The number one key ingredient to a sanctuary is the food source, because again, if you spook out the food source, they're not in those bedding areas in any way. We like to keep that food source consistent. If there's multiple food sources, we like to have the same food, so the same does and fawns hit that food source. every single day. You don't have them traveling back and forth to hit different food sources, clover here, beans here, corn here, because they're all peaking at a different time during the season. You want consistency in every single plot, especially your big holding plots, so that the same doe family groups key in on that every single day, and then you have those bucks that come in from different angles. A sanctuary is a sanctuary because there's a connection of food and bedding, and it's unpressured. I would rather see you spook out a bedding area, a random bedding area out here. There's a mature buck that lives over here and you spook him out. Well, he might just go over 200 yards because he wants to hit that food source every single day. That's his most important ingredient of his daily movement. And then he comes over, finds a different bedding area, and still hits that food. We see that time and time again. They just shift at a different angle, still come in. However, most people don't get to see that because they spook out their food sources. They put a big blind. We love our rednecks, but we don't put them right in the middle of a food plot. We don't put tree stands right in the middle of a food plot. We don't like to spook out our food plots. We like to be able to get in and out without spooking deer. So think about having a sanctuary this year. Don't just tell us, I put this 30 acres over here. Often when someone says, yeah, we have this 10 acres we never step foot in. Deer can see them from there, hear them from there, smell them from there. So it's really not a sanctuary. Always keep that food intact, and that'll set up your whole property. Your whole property design, your whole hunting design on public land. You can build it on private land, find it on public, build it on private land, find it on public land. I'll back up, Dylan.
Okay.
You can build it on private land, you can find it on public land, and that's how you hunt. You're always looking for a sanctuary. But again, think about that food source first, and the bedding areas relate to that, and you'll have found a true bedding area anywhere a whitetail roams.